Joining us now is Dahlia Lithwick, chief legal correspondent and senior editor for Slate.com. She's been covering the nomination hearings from Washington. Dahlia, thanks for coming back on the show tonight.
Hey, Rachel, thank you for having me.
You got to watch all of these rounds of questions in person today. Yesterday, you said after opening statements that it seemed like the opposition strategy against Sotomayor was really, in a basic sense, about issues of race. Was it day 2 of that today?
A lot of it really was. I was surprised, actually, how many times we heard the wise Latina woman thing come up. I thought, maybe we'll go to that well once, maximum twice. But we went there many, many times today. And many, many times what we were told is, sure, you have this impressive 17-year record as a judge, and we can't find much to complain about. But here's what we know. We know that your speech, your wise Latina speech, somehow gives us a truer sense of who you really are than that entire record. So it was always sort of trying to bifurcate who she is holding herself out to be and who she really is because of this one sentence. So it's interesting. It's sort of a way of framing it as this is the real issue and everything else is just kind of wallpaper.
I was happy today, though, because there were a few questions about Sotomayor's judicial record other than the Ricci case, a few questions that weren't about speeches. Senator Grassley asked her about eminent domain. Senator Kyle asked her about a Second Amendment case. What were those lines of questioning like? Did those raise substantive issues without a good back and forth?
They were both very funny colloquies, Rachel, because in both cases you have her record, which is pretty modest. In both the gun case that they talked about and the takings case they talked about, she didn't get to the big issues. She looked at a much narrower issue. And so in both these cases, you have Grassley saying to her, well, why didn't you get to the big issue from the Kelo, the famous Connecticut eminent domain case? Why didn't you get to that? And she would say, well, the guy just didn't file his appeal on time. It was a question of statute of limitations. I didn't have to get to the big constitutional question. Same thing in the guns case, is you have this angry Republican saying to her, Orrin Hatch is saying, why didn't you get to this big, huge issue in Heller? Why didn't you get to whether the Second Amendment is incorporated against the states? And she says, well, because the Supreme Court told me not to. In Heller, the Supreme Court expressly said, we're not getting to this issue, so I'm not going to get to this issue. So you have this weird inversion where they're like, why aren't you more activist, Judge Sotomayor? And it was sort of surreal. When they do get to her cases, it's to say, you shouldn't be so humble and modest. That's so John Roberts.
Well, watching on TV today, it is, even though there's sort of a foregone conclusion here, this is riveting. It's a Supreme Court nomination hearing. And the way that it's covered on TV is that you get close-ups of Sotomayor at the table, at the witness table, and you get close-ups of the senators while they're talking. And you can sort of get into the drama back and forth. But I wonder, you've been there in person, and seeing who all is in the room, not just who's talking at any one second, does that give all of this a different feel? Either the combativeness that we saw, especially, for example, with Lindsey Graham today and John Kyle today, or specifically the talk about race and prejudice. Does it have sort of a different feeling when you're in the room?
I'm glad you asked that. I have the sense that this is playing really different at home than it is in the room, because you need to understand the first couple of rows behind her, you can probably see this on TV. They're her family, they're her supporters, they're her friends. There are a lot of people who are not white men sitting directly behind her, and there are many, many reporters, for instance, who are only Hispanic reporters working for Hispanic publications. And so things that might play really well if you were just talking to Joe the plumber or Sarah Palin just kind of elicit a little bit of a sense that of a bridge too far. And I thought her little exchange with Lindsey Graham, where he was saying, you're a big bully and I don't like bully judges, and telling her that maybe she needed a little time for reflection, and the sort of just the very, you go to timeout, young lady, and really think about your wise Latina comments. The way it played, at least among the people around me, was like, huh? Do you really want to go there? So I don't know. I think Graham did what he had to do, and he does it with his buttermilk smile, and he's so sweet and lovely that he can get away with it. But I don't know that they understand that they just can't talk to Joe the plumber anymore.
Dahlia Lithwick, chief legal correspondent and senior editor at Slate.com, and our connection to the hearings today, these last couple of shows. Thanks very much for joining us 2 nights in a row, Dahlia. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have you noticed this week that we haven't heard beep from former Vice President Dick Cheney? After doing interviews with every conceivable American news outlet not named The Rachel Maddow Show, the former vice president has been very, very quiet since it has been alleged in Washington this week that he personally ordered that Congress not be informed about some post-9/11 program that is yet to be described. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson was chief of staff to the Secretary of State Colin Powell during the first term of the Bush administration. He will join us next to talk about this story. Stay with us.